Lesley's going to walk through a couple of marketing processes and sales processes and sort of show you how we think through things. What's nice is that Lesley's only been at Box for about 6 months, so she comes newer than myself and can give a real perspective of how this is really very different from how most companies collaborate and share. Much more open, much more collaborative. Definitely transparency is a big part of how we get our work done. So I will hand off to Lesley.
Thanks, Jen. So as Jen said, one of the things that was unique to me when I first started at Box was how transparent the organization is. And that goes all the way across from developing product all the way through to what's happening when a deal comes in. For instance, when deals do happen, the entire company knows about it, and that's because they're all put in a Box folder. So you'll get a number of different kinds of comments from across the organization, and those are comments from both engineering, marketing. In other words, marketing generally says, where did this come from? That's the comment we generally get from marketing after the congratulations, of course. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the workflows that are associated with the things that I care about, which are really the products and how we get leads into the process, and then how do we make the sales organization as efficient as possible. And I thought I'd start by talking about what's happened before. As Jen said, some of the things that you have to realize when you come into a culture like Box and you start to use a tool like Box is that the process that you had before gets vastly different. And it's all based on how open you are. And one of the things, as I said earlier and Jen said, is that at Box we're very transparent and very open. You can participate in workflows and comment on different things, even those things that are not necessarily related to the job that you have. And that creates can become somewhat cumbersome if you don't have a process for doing that. And Box really gives us a process for doing that, in that we're able to centralize workflow in one place and allow people to comment regardless of whether they're in sales or marketing or engineering. And one of the things that this does is it takes away the friction that happens in organizations that are moving fast like Box. Box has a kind of a mantra, move 10x, so do everything 10x. Well, if you do everything 10x and you have complex workflows where you're trying to create features and you're trying to engage people in that process and you don't have a centralized place to do it where they can interact with content when they want to, it can become quite a mess and a lot of friction can be created. So the goal, why are we doing these things? Why are we doing them in Box? Is to get rid of the friction and accelerate our workflow. In other words, move fast, because that's what you need to do to be 10x. So this is not my area of expertise, but I will tell you what's kind of interesting is a number of stakeholders participate in the feature development. And the way that we've been able to give people the ability to participate in the feature development is by centralizing the content, as I said. And that enables the engineering team and the marketing team and sometimes the sales team to participate in the design and development of products. We put all of the content in a single place. People provide comments. The design changes, it's all versioned. And when it gets to the point of being finalized, people get notified whether they're in the product or engineering organization or whether they're in sales. And what that means is they can passively discover that content or they can be actively involved. And the reason I put this up here is because I've been a part of this, and that is something that's completely different to me in this organization. So once those things are formalized and all the reviews happen and Jen puts her mark of approval on, yes, this is what we want to do, the organization then goes into what we call the go-to-market program. And and I'm going to get these names wrong, Jen, so there's a program marketing manager, and that person is really responsible for making sure that the content that we want in front of people gets in front of them in a coordinated way. So they're really the orchestrator or the conductor of the go-to-market strategy. Obviously, a huge amount of collaboration happens in this, and if you tried to put everything in one folder, it just wouldn't work. So one of the things that person does when they sit down to do the go-to-market planning is they start to create a number of subfolders within the overall go-to-market folder. And those subfolders are shared with people who are internal to the organization and external to the organization. The wonderful thing about that is we are able to run a number of parallel workflows and capture it in a single place, so that if I'm sitting doing a campaign and I have my coworker over here who is doing the launch page, that I can stay connected with that content and I can access that content when it's appropriate for me to do that. Some of the other things that have really helped in putting these things in subfolders is that our communications with our constituents who are outside of the organization, like the agencies that we do business with who do the demand creation process, are now much more engaged, and they are able to participate in their timeline. It doesn't require, we don't have to get a meeting together and get on the phone and push things back and forth over email. It all happens in Box. And every single time a comment is made or a revision is done, they are notified through the Updates tab. They can be notified daily if they want to. That's based on the daily updates. They can be notified every time something happens, or they can just go to their Update tab. Most of us in Box use the Updates tab as the way to stay engaged. It's also a wonderful way to, again, get knowledge about what we're doing passively. You go in there and you're completely brought up to date on what's going on in the organization. So the other thing to think about is how many different kinds of content we can capture. So we enable the external parties who do business with us, who are good at working in their environment, to do that. In other words, if they use Google Docs, they can use Google Docs. If they have images that they need to give us that show us what the copy is going to look like, they can put those images in Box. So it's really enabling people to work in the way that they want to work to get work done more quickly. Again, as I said, it's all about being fast and efficient. So now we've got the website update, we've got the pages figured out, those are being done through parallel workflow processes, and now we've got to move on to finalization of the product. And we want to make sure that all those workflows come back together. So when it's finalized, as Jen said, there's a notification goes out, everybody gets to stop talking and commenting on what they're going to say or do, and we all agree what the message is that's going to go out to people like the analysts and press. And typically, the analysts and press are notified before we actually launch the product to give them an insight to what we're going to be saying and how we're going to be saying, et cetera, positioning it, so that they have an opportunity to tell the rest of the world what they think about what we're doing. So one of the easiest ways to do that is to send them an email with what's called a shared link. And the shared link enables them, from whatever device they're using, whether that's their iPad or their desktop or their phone, to connect into the content without having to log into Box. It just drops them right into the content that they need to see in order to write their copy or write whatever they're going to write about our launch. So again, it goes back to making it easy for not only internal people to access content and collaborate on that content, but also makes it easy for external people to interact with us in a way that's simple and easy. Don't have to log into it, into Box. They don't have to log into anything. They simply click the link and it puts them right where they want to go. All right, so last but not least, now getting to the area that I may have some familiarity with, is sales. One of the greatest things that happens with Box, and I was talking about this at Dreamforce a couple weeks ago, is standing on the floor at Dreamforce, had my iPhone, and we have a great group who does success stories, and they're just pumping them out. And I was at Box, and I'm on my iPhone, and I'm open up, and there's another success story. So right then and there, I'm able to take advantage of content that the marketing organization has pushed out to me, not had to tell me, not forced me to look at, that I can use immediately while standing on the floor at Dreamforce. It's kind of unheard of in my past life. Usually what you got was a bunch of documentation. You went through a process where marketing sat in front of you and said, this is what you need to be saying. That's not the case anymore. That's not the way people are working anymore. They're working from a number of different places. They need to have the access to content immediately. In my case, sometimes I need access to content that I thought I had and I didn't have. So the ability to access it on an iPad or through the phone is terrific. So the last step in the go-to-market strategy is pushing the content into the Box sales portal, and that's really where the salespeople live. That's where they go to get all the content they need to be successful in sales. So as I said, one of the big parts on that is making sure that it's accessible in the context of the tools they're using, whether those tools are in the field in front of the customer or on their desktop. So moving on to what's the big change we made using Box in the sales process, it's a couple of things. It's the portal and how we organize content in the portal. So when we have a launch, there's a launch kit that sits in the portal and we all get access to it, and we can look at it at 10 at night or at 9 in the morning, or we can pull from that and give it to the client. So it's empowering the team, really is empowering the team. We don't need to go to marketing and ask for the success story about Six Flags. It's there. We can access it. So let's talk about how we specifically made improvements that have made a tremendous difference in the way that we move through the sales process from this point where we first interact with the customer all the way through to the point that that customer is onboarded at Box. The client, when they first engage with one of the salespeople, is immediately brought into the Box world, if you will. We create a client folder, and in that client folder we put all the content that is relevant to the discussion that we're having with them. What that does is it gets them very engaged with what we do. It proves out that the fact that Box is simple. It proves out the fact that it works in a workflow, and it proves out that they can interact with us in the way they want to interact with us, when they want to interact with us. Oftentimes we put things like files in there that tell them how to use Box. We put content that's relevant to their use case in there. Then we start a conversation. So we'll put comments in that are related to the things that they've told us. What this does is it builds a relationship with the client faster, and it builds a relationship of trust and transparency, which is really, really great for those of us who are working in inside sales, as they say. We don't get face-to-face with the customer, so this is one of the best ways to get face-to-face without actually being there, because you're interacting with them on their time frame, and it's not a pick up the phone, have a hardcore boom, 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 ask a bunch of questions. It's really, oh, I discovered this content, I have a question about it, I'm going to put a comment in, and I get notified as a salesperson when that comment gets put in, and I can respond. One of the other really great things we've been able to do is accelerate the contract close process. So we've integrated Box with DocuSign, which is one of the 150 integration partners that we have on our platform, that makes it transparent for a sales rep to get a contract into the hands of a client and have that document signed and put back into Box. It's very, very easy. All they have to do is create the contract, put it back up in that folder that the client was interacting with. It's got a number of different pieces of information. One of those is a CC that goes back into our client services organization. And when the client signs it, again, e-signs it. It's not a, sign it by hand, go to the fax machine, then push it in. It's really a e-sign, pop it back, push the done. It pushes that back into the Box folder, which then notifies our client services organizations in their folder, which is all of the clients that have been brought in this month. So two things have just gone, two things have happened there. One, it took the client a tenth of the time that it would have taken them to sign that. Two, they're already starting their engagement with our client services organization. So that's been a huge benefit for us. The other thing that happens is that when that comes in, the rep is notified, as is the client services organization. So the rep can actually add commentary to that content that gets passed throughout the organization to anyone who has access. As I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, the rest of the organization gets notified. So again, Jen knows that we signed up XYZ customer. I know, for instance, when I was driving up here, I was getting notifications on all the customers we've been signing up, and I'm able to turn around and say, great job, Steve, on the deal you just brought in, or Brooke, oh, we only have 25 more K to get to our number. It's a wonderful thing. It helps the customer because it's quick, and it helps Box because they stay engaged in the process, and we're passing it through the organization. Finally, the last thing that happens in this process is billing is notified. So we've gone from the point of interacting with the customer when they first come into Box all the way through to the billing organization being notified that we've got a new client and we need to bill using Box and our integrations. That's streamlined the process tremendously. It's proven to the client how simple and easy it is to use Box. And it's made the process for the salesperson much less stressful. This time of the month, if you guys know, there's 2 days left in the month and in the quarter, is a hugely stressful time. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been standing here, let me tell you that. I'd be pulling my hair out. So this whole process and the technology that we're able to apply has made life easier for customers, and it's made it easier for folks like themselves in sales. And it's made it easier for the client services organization, because again, it isn't a, handoff that is a manual handoff. It is an automated handoff. It doesn't require the sales rep to remember to go tell the client services rep. It also doesn't require the sales rep to go to the billing organization to remind them. It's all automated. It all happens in Box. It's simple. It's easy. It's collaborative. So that was really what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Box, using Box at Box. And sure, I'll take a question.
I had a quick question. On your contract process, I noticed you had Salesforce as your CRM. How does that all tie back together, like in logging those notes in Salesforce? Or how did you talk to each other?
So we have access to the Box portal from within Salesforce. So when a rep is working through a deal, they can look at content that's relevant to that customer. The other thing is we also have a tab. So it really depends on what you want to do with that customer, but you can launch the whole process from within Salesforce. And again, good question, because that Salesforce is really where salespeople live. They don't necessarily live in Box. Yes?
You talked about a sales portal.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, how it was created or how it works?
Well, it's a little bit organic, as these things usually are. You know, Jen's probably a better person to answer that, but I can just from my perspective say that it was done so that people had one place to go to get the content that was related to the things they needed to do, and it's organized so that we have information about what clients are doing. We have information about what processes we need to be using, and all of those are represented in different folders. In other words, if you have a launch kit like I talked about, that would be in what marketing owns in that portal. Do you want to add any comments on that?
I think basically you're absolutely right. It was somewhat organic. It was more that we needed to feed content to sales and to help them understand what was the latest and sort of the typical problem that a marketing group has. So we actually did it quite simply at first, just the sales portal folder and then organizing those subfolders underneath to try to be as sort of slice and dice it in as many ways as we could so that very quickly you could say, well, I'm talking to a customer in this industry, or I'm talking to a customer who's using or wanting to use Box for this use case. So we kind of try to slice that and then, use basically a success story around that, or maybe there's a reference, a customer reference.
So you're just using the folder structure within the normal Box environment?
Yes,
It's not
and
anything special?
nothing too special. We've actually looked and started to use tagging. I think over time, as that functionality gets better, we're going to use tagging a lot more. Search is also becoming since.
Absolutely, search is very important in that context, in the context of what sales is doing.
It would be a great example of a company that has been on Box for, I guess, obviously the longest of any customer. It would be interesting to see how many folders and files Aaron Levy has access to. It's just a god-awful lot. And one of the things that we found is that there are three things that actually makes it manageable. And they're quite unexpected because you would think, well, folder structure, things like that. It's actually search. Number one way that we find files as we start to get more and more content in there. The second is the updates tab. So
Huge.
There's just so much of what is actually being acted upon is always what you wanted to know anyway. You very rarely, I want to see that document from 5 years ago.
Right.
So I have done that and I have found it through
Yeah.
search, so that's always good to know.
Yeah.
And the third is the way the content in the folders is organized is by date. So you're always, even if you can't remember what the file was called or maybe the content within the document itself, so that you weren't able to find it through search for some reason, you will always see the content that's been acted on latest at the top of your folder, and that makes a huge difference in how fast you get to the files then.
Yeah, one thing about salespeople is they usually don't look at content when it's created. They look at it when they need it. So that's one of the really great things about the way this is organized, is that it's accessible when we need it. The other thing I was going to say about using Box, I joined and I created a new hire training program, and the wonderful thing is I was able to pull most of the content for that new hire training from other folders that exist in the organization and centralize it under the heading of training. So I'm getting the old, I have no time left, but I wanted to say a couple things. In a company growing 10x, it's really important that we are able to share and collaborate fast, and we've achieved that by these two processes. I certainly have seen it in the process with closing a sale, which is one of the places where I experience the most pain. Secondly, it's really easy for clients, vendors, and partners to adopt Box because we integrate it into every single process that we have, and that includes engagement with the customer at the first point of engagement. Third, it helps us build stronger relationships. You heard Aaron talk about that earlier this morning, that it's about the relationships. It's not about the content. It's about the relationship with the content and what it means to the interactions you're having with coworkers and vendors and constituents. It's really helped us build a stronger relationship. I've seen it most with my clients, some of which are here today. And then last, which we always want to do, it saves both time and money because we're not searching for information and where we can't find it. We're being notified proactively, and we're passively discovering content that is important to us. So with that, I'll say that's Dogfooding by Boxers, no pun intended. Thank you.